what surprises today have you heard that you feel have some real validity? Because a lot of the stuff, and what I really do think is today is a microcosm of what the last 3 months have looked like. You really can't believe one word that's said out there because we don't have any idea why somebody's saying it, what their motivations are, until they actually step up to the podium and make their pick.
Well, that's exactly it. Right now, you have, every team, and I've had, right before you guys called and I hung up on your producer the first time. Sorry about that because I was on the phone with the GM. Everybody's trying to figure out what's going on, but it's not really going to become, in many cases, real until we see what happens for sure at number 3. Because as much as everybody, has speculated in terms of Mac Jones or Trey Lance, what happens at that spot is going to have a trickle-down effect on what happens elsewhere in the top 10. Who among the many teams that have been trying to trade up into the top 10, whether that's the Vikings, the Patriots, the Eagles, the Saints, who is willing to make that type of move and to give up the draft capital? There's just so many unknowns that, and again, we could have a deal at any point. We've already seen multiple deals in advance of the draft, people moving around the board, but a lot of the action is really going to occur within the round, which is going to make for exciting TV on NFL Network and some other networks I won't mention. But we may not know exactly what happens and how much of that talk becomes reality until we get going.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The 49ers, we know there's going to be a quarterback there. I really think the dominoes that could fall really hinge on the Falcons at 4 because they become. Are they still a team that is interested in a quarterback, or did Arthur Smith, when he got there, find that Matt Ryan is still the guy, and they can either trade out of that spot and do a lot of damage with some different draft picks, or they can take a guy there, and then you're talking about 2 quarterbacks now that can fall anywhere between 4 and 20 probably. But if they decide to move out of that spot or take a quarterback and you have the 1 out of the 5 left, you could see a bunch of teams wanting to jump up there to make sure they get the quarterback before they're all gone.
There's no question that 5 quarterbacks are going to go in round 1. At this point, I wouldn't rule out seeing all 5 go in the top 10 just because of the amount of teams that are hovering, and knowing you've got teams like the Panthers at 8 and the Broncos at 9 that potentially, even after Denver made a deal with Carolina yesterday for Teddy Bridgewater, and even after the Panthers acquired Sam Darnold, those teams still could be in the mix for quarterbacks. And that's why several days ago, that was the hot spot. 7, 8, 9 is where other teams were calling around in terms of potential trades. Now, in terms of Atlanta, certainly they evaluated their options. You have to remember Matt Ryan won the MVP 5 years ago playing a very similar system to what Arthur Smith is going to be installing. They have some weapons. We know about them getting calls on Julio Jones. Their salary cap situation is not ideal at all at this stage. We'll see whether or not anything happens there. The prevailing thought within the league in recent days has been that if the Falcons stay, which it seems, again, as of now, that they will, simply because they've been open to trades, they've gotten calls, they've not gotten anything that's made them, to this point, consider moving. The belief in the league has been that they take Florida tight end Kyle Pitts, which, if you still have Julio, would potentially give you Pitts, Julio, and Calvin Ridley all on the same team. And I talked with a coach about this last night who was saying, I understand all these people are saying you got to get rid of one of them. It's a great problem to have with the way you can stress defenses with those 3 guys, even if it's for just 1 year. So you've got a lot of young GMs, first-time GMs, who are going to be making some of these picks. Trent Baalke at number 1 with the Jaguars has been a GM before, of course, in San Francisco, but that's a new program with Urban Meyer. You got a new coach at number 2 in Robert Saleh with Joe Douglas, who has not drafted his own quarterback because Sam Darnold was from the prior regime. How is he going to handle this? The Falcons at 4, Terry Fontenot and Arthur Smith. This is their first time going through this. And then at number 7, you got Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell in Detroit. What are they going to do? Scott Fitterer is a new GM too with Denver at 8, George Payton at 9 with the Broncos. All of which is to say, a lot of times teams are evaluating the track record of other people. For instance, when Howie Roseman is calling every team in the top 10, everyone goes, that's Howie. He calls every team every year about every pick. Maybe he moves up, but maybe that's him doing his due diligence. With all these new GMs who are looking, to make impactful moves, especially in the top 10, it really puts a lot of chips on the table in these situations, especially when you've got 5 quarterbacks that, depending on what team you're talking to, somebody's got them evaluated as potential franchise guys.
We're talking to Tom Pelissero from the NFL Network, SiriusXM radio host as well. Big day. What teams outside the top 10 are you looking at or focused on that are really trying to make an effort to get up there and move inside the top 10 to take a guy that they feel like they need?
Well, again, the Eagles have been making those calls for days, over and over. We'll see whether anything comes of it. Certainly there have been rumblings that they would be among the other teams. The belief has been they might be taking a defensive player, a corner, maybe Kwity Paye. But, GMs don't call and tell the other teams who they're taking, so that's largely speculative. The Vikings have made a lot of calls. Potentially, if one of the offensive tackles slides, that could be somebody they're targeting. The Patriots have called up and down the top 10, looking for their possibility to get in. The belief among the other teams that have gotten those calls is their guy would be Justin Fields. And then I mentioned the Saints. And I know Ian Rappaport first reported that this morning, that they've been calling about moving up, potentially even into the top 10. There's a variety of different directions that could go. They are always aggressive. They don't mind bundling picks and ending up with fewer draft picks overall to go up and get one guy they like. They did it with Marcus Davenport a couple of years ago. They've done it in other cases. Would not surprise me at all if they get involved to move up. But the other thing is, again, going back to just because you don't know what happens at 3, you don't know who is going to begin to slide. You don't know what's going to happen necessarily at 4 or 5 either. Do the Bengals take Jamar Chase, or do they take Penei Sewell? If they take Penei Sewell, all of a sudden the Dolphins are sitting there staring at Jamar Chase, or potentially being able to trade down with somebody who really wants to go up and get Chase. There's all sorts of directions this can go, and the pivot point really begins with what happens at that number 3 pick.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.